Hey guys, Bitter here to tell you about the latest from Satan, Earth, Infernal, out April 1st on Metal Blade Records. The album has 10 tracks, 48 minutes in length, and this the band's 6th full-length studio album. They are a British heavy metal band. Now, as far as the design is concerned, I'm a little bit divided. Some things I like, some things I don't like. One of the main things that I didn't like was having a song like Mercury's Shadow really early on in the experience. This is an instrumental track. It's the 4th track on the album, and I feel like it comes a little bit too early into the listening experience. I don't need an instrumental track that early on. I'm just getting used to the sound, I'm just getting used to the record, I'm just starting to take my first steps into this album, into this experience. A song like that should be placed perhaps a little bit deeper into the track listing, maybe in the middle to break the album between side A and side B, creating a sense of an interlude, or maybe towards the tail end of the record. After you already been through the album a little bit, after you already perhaps developed some roots, some attachment to the experience, a song like that can have a much bigger impact. Earlier on, it just feels a little bit out of place. It doesn't hurt the album, but it also doesn't make it better. Now, on the positive side, I like the consistency and quality that this album has from top to bottom. What you get at the beginning is going to be what you're going to get all the way through. When I look at the end of this record, some of my favorite songs are the ones finishing the album. You could almost say that the album actually gets stronger with every single track. You don't see this every day, but when you find an album like this, it really tells you all that you need to know. That the album has consistency, that the album has balance, that is a strong record, no weak tracks, and it allows the listener to have a consistent listening experience throughout its entire existence. Everything that you really want in order to really appreciate an album from start to finish. As far as the soundscape goes, this album is old school sound, old school mixing, old school approach, old school experience. But when you look at classic heavy metal, this record really spends perhaps the first 20 years of that genre. So it's not like it has just one way of creating music or of creating sound or of creating experience. They really took different sides or different faces of heavy metal from that period of time and encapsulated it all into one single record. So this allows the sound to have some movement. It allows the sound to have some creativity, but never really lose track of where you are, where you're going, and how you're going to get there. It allows the record to stay balanced, to stay together as one, to have almost a sense of continuity as far as the sound is concerned, but not be repetitive, song in and song out. That's the overall feel of this album. Also an album that from a soundscape perspective doesn't have big sound, but it has impactful sound. A sound that, because of that old school approach, old school mixing, brings in a certain warmth to the overall feel that you get when you're listening to it. It permeates really well. It's an album that allows the sound to travel within it, to have life, to have energy. It feels very organic, it feels very analog, and therefore their warmth comes from those two elements working really well with one another. Within that sound, you have drums, bass, and guitars really doing different things at different times. I like the drums on this record because they're very controlled. They allow the album to have some consistency. They add substance. They control the baseline of what the whole entire record is going to be about, but they never really overpower the experience. They also don't have a lot of thickness to them. They merge well with a more driven sound that you're going to get from the guitars. The guitars are really the motor, the fuel that drives the experience of this record. But the bass plays a very important role. It not only connects those two elements as it should, it also has a lot of grooviness. I really like the groove that you're going to get from the sound of the bass. It has a very important impact. It has a noticeable impact. Some songs, obviously more than others, but it has a noticeable impact. One that makes this record feel even older. It gives it a little bit more of a timestamp. When you look at that period of the first 20 years of heavy metal, the bass here really plays a role in showcasing you what he used to do during that time period, and perhaps have lost a little bit of that sense, of that push in more modern times. But really well put together, really well recorded, and enabling everything else around to have a little bit more life, a little bit more energy. And when it comes to energy, nothing has more energy on this record than the guitar sound, the solos, the melodies, the drive, some grit that the guitars really push. This is an album that really depends on the guitars to drive the message home, to drive the listener through the experience, but then to take you to that finish line. I just love the energy. I love the approach. I love the intensity, the momentum, the melody, the mixing, the moving. They just have so much life. They're just so interesting to listen to. This is an album that you could almost just listen to the guitars and really appreciate everything that they're creating, the shapes that they're creating, the movement that they're putting forward, how they're igniting these songs, what are they doing in terms of creating images, in terms of creating a sense of atmosphere. Just so well done from start to finish. Is definitely one of the main highlights, one of the main courses that this record will offer. Now, from a vocal perspective, the album is very consistent. I like the layers that exist throughout the record. There's not a lot of them, but there are a few. I like some of the backing vocals, once again adding a little bit more volume, adding a little bit more texture, but used very sporadic throughout the entire record, so they don't take over the overall vocal performance, but they just become a little bit of something that adds to that same performance. But all around, you have to see the consistency that the vocals have, how grounded they are, how connected they are, and how well they work in terms of really guiding you through the lyrical content and how this album moves. Perhaps the last song on the record is the one where you're going to see the widest range as far as vocals are concerned. That is Earth, We Bequeath. That song vocally really feels more dynamic than any other track on this album, but overall the vocals are really consistent. I would have liked to see a little bit more of that song spread out throughout the entire record, because the range on that track is absolutely phenomenal, and I really feel like the album would have gained even more life, even more energy, if the vocals had a similar approach, more so throughout the entire record and not just defined by one song. Now, from a lyrical perspective, the vocals really interact well with the message or messages of this album. There are several, but there's one that sticks out because it ties in with the title of the album, Earth Infernal, that is global warming. There's a few tracks on this record that match up to that title of the album, but overall it's not just a record about global warming. There's all different topics, there's all different themes. It's a very well crafted lyrical record from that perspective. All around, this is a very interesting album. It's an old school classic heavy metal album that definitely deserves a spin if you're a fan of the genre. It's not earth shattering, but definitely an enjoyable experience. Now, as far as favorite songs are concerned, I want to start off with A Sorrow Unspent. The drums are definitely one of the elements that adds flavor, at least at the start of this song, because they have a very unique style. They have a very unique sound that you're not going to hear it on any other song on this record. Once that experience subsides, the track picks up in momentum. It's a track that moves extremely well, has great movement. The vocals guide a lot of that movement, using some layers in order to add volume, but not to change the DNA of the vocals themselves. It is still allowing the guitars to be the propeller that really moves the record, that moves the track all the way through, that gives it a little bit of energy. The chorus slows the track down. So this is a song that is picking up momentum, and then as it gets closer to the chorus, it slows down. As soon as the chorus is done, it boosts up again, it picks up momentum again until you get to the next chorus when it slows down again. This makes the song feel more dynamic, but in a very linear format, and I really like that style. Next, you have The Blood Ran Deep. This is my favorite song on the album, and it's the second last track on the album. It just goes to show you the quality all the way through. It's an incredible, catchy song. It's a great track as far as the sound, but it has this raw feel, raw power to it. There's a lot of emotion as far as the lyrical content goes, how that comes across with the vocals and the sound behind it. It's a track that has great melody. The melody really becomes part of the overall experience, but it also has some heaviness. It also has some grit, which gives the song more flavor, more movement, more texture, more substance all around. I love how this song comes across, but that chorus, the chorus is definitely the calling card of this track. Super hooky, super catchy musically and vocally. Last but not least, Earth, We Bequeath. This is the closing track on the album, a more methodic track than the previous two. The previous two had a lot of movement, had a lot of energy. This track is a little bit more methodic. It almost feels more like a doom or even a classic rock song. It has more of those elements intertwined with classic heavy metal. So it's a song that doesn't have just one DNA. It has a mixture of different DNAs in terms of how it comes across, how it's structured, and how it sounds. It moves very linear from start to finish. It doesn't have a lot of movement from that perspective musically, perhaps a little bit more movement vocally. This is definitely the most dynamic song vocally. It has the biggest range. The highs are so incredible high that you just want more of it. And when you get that at the end of the record, you almost feel cheated. Like, why didn't I get this earlier on? Absolutely phenomenal vocal performance on this track. It sets the song apart, and the impact that it has on the sound, it sets the sound apart from any other song on the album as well. This is it, Satan, Earth, Infernal, out April 1st on Metal Blade Records. Let me know your thoughts on the band, on the singles. Use the comment section below. I'll be reading those and getting back to you. Take care, guys.